Hi, I'm Linda Katz-Wilner. Welcome to another episode of the Hard Facts about Soft Skills. I'm here today with a friend and colleague, Ryan McShane. Ryan is the president of HR Evolution. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you so much, Linda. It's a pleasure to be here.
And it's great to have you because I know about your areas of expertise, and we've worked together in the past and met each other several years ago. And I'm anxious to hear what you have to say about what is involved in the workplace and how soft skills are so important.
Very good.
So to begin with, Ryan, tell us a little bit about your background.
Happy to do so. As Linda said, I'm Ryan McShane, the president and CEO of HR Evolution. And I started my career, of all places, and I say of all places, the federal government, because had someone told me a long time ago that based on your personality, Ryan, federal government may not be the best choice for you to start your career. That aside, what I've done since then is work both in federal government, I've worked in the private sector, I've worked in the startup environment, and large nonprofits. So I've had those experiences that I'm able to bring to the table for my clients in a human resources and leadership development capacity today.
Ryan, your company is HR Evolution. Why that name?
I'm glad you asked. The name is near and dear to me because I really believe that it connotes the ever-changing environment of the workforce today. And specifically in human resources, the profession has changed a great deal and evolved a great deal. We're no longer the administrators taking care of just personnel records. It's really become a much more strategic role. And therefore, I focused on HR Evolution because I purport the continuous growth and evolution of the workforce. That's what's near and dear to me.
And that reminds me, we've worked together in the Chesapeake Human Resource Association, which you were president of recently.
Indeed.
Our connection was that we worked on the Workforce Readiness Committee, and I had the great opportunity to do a workshop with you. And from that, what I was impressed with was your approach to the behavioral competencies. Tell us a little bit about that.
Really, there's three components to workforce. There's people, there's processes, and there's systems. You can have the best processes and systems in place, but if you don't have the best talent in place to drive those processes and systems, then it all falls apart. So therefore, we need to focus on what motivates others, and are we doing things with alignment to the overall organizational purpose? Sometimes we ask the question, why are we doing this? And we hear the common answer, because we've always done it that way. So we're adhering more to the processes and systems than we are to what makes sense from a purpose standpoint. That's why I focus on the people component, because we can transcend the processes and systems to ensure that people are well aligned to carrying those systems forward and making sure that there's alignment to the overall mission and vision of the organization.
And that becomes important when somebody's going into the job interview process.
Very
And
much
that's
so.
how it came up. That's how I learned about it. So how is that important when somebody is going for a job interview, or how they can prepare for a job interview?
What a great question. So most job interviews are conducted through what's called a behavior-based interview process. And the behavior-based interview process is predicated on the fact that past behavior is a strong predictor of future behavior. So you hear questions like, tell me about a time in which you experienced a challenge with a colleague, and how did you address that challenge, and what was the result? And so what I advise my clients in terms of interview skill preparation is they want to think like golfers. We're always shooting for par in golf. Well, par in interviews is problem, action, and resolution. So when you respond, you want to be brief, you want to be positive, you want to state what the situation was, what action you took, and what was the result of that action.
Great. I only wish that can help in my golf game. Now, what are your thoughts? We keep hearing about the soft skills gap that now exists in the workforce. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's funny you bring up soft skills because I remember early on in my career when folks found out that I was involved in human resources and they talked about soft skills and, oh, that's nice stuff, that's nice. where are the hard skills, where are the real bottom line impacts and effects. And thankfully, soft skills have become known as essential skills in the workforce. We have become so focused on technology and external systems that we've forgotten who drives those systems, the people. And it's how we relate and interact with one another that really drives the energy behind what we do.
And I've heard there's some research or studies lately that are saying that people may hire the person who's the better soft skills even if they don't have the hard skills, because those can be learned easier. Is that right?
I often say hire for attitude, because attitude is going to give you everything that you're looking for. You can train the technical skills if the person has also the aptitude along with the attitude. But if they have all the technical skills and you really just can't relate to that person, there's a significant chasm of separation between you and that person. And therefore, we want to have people that we like to work with on a regular basis, that we get along with, we relate to very well. And that's where the soft skills come in handy.
And another piece of the soft skills that are near and dear to my heart are the ability to communicate.
Indeed.
So if they don't have the ability to communicate, they may have good intentions, but it's not working.
That's
And
exactly
so that's
right.
something to address. I know you do many other things besides that. What other services do you offer?
Well, thanks for asking. So, in addition to human resources consulting for small to medium-sized businesses that can't necessarily afford a full-time staffer to support those functions, I also provide leadership development. And leadership development is something that, again, is near and dear to me. I don't know if you've ever experienced having to work for a boss that was all about command and control and do what I tell you because I'm your boss. And it was never about motivating that person. It was never about relating to that person and finding out what makes them inspired to do the best work that they can do. It's just, I'm your boss, I'm going to command you to do this, and you follow through and do that. That model is really lost on the millennial generation, and really, frankly, most people in the workforce today. I think we respond much better to a servant leadership model. The servant leadership model describes a notion that as a leader, I'm here to make sure that you're supported, that you have the resources that you need to be successful, and finding out what that is for each individual on your team. You know, treating everyone the same. In human resources, there's an equity factor where you want to treat people consistently, but we know that different people are motivated by different things. So it's incumbent upon our leaders to find out what those things are for each individual.
It reminds me of the video by Simon Sinek, who talks about be the last to talk. Make sure you let everybody else on your team talk as a leader so that you can get them to be creative and come up with their own ideas.
So true.
That fits with what you're talking about.
Indeed.
Now, we spoke in the past, and you spoke about conscious capitalism.
Yes.
What is that?
That is a concept that once I discovered it, it was like the angels singing, Linda. Ah, finally! Something where you could put into context and word and verbiage the way I've always felt that workforce should run. And so what I mean by that, conscious capitalism is predicated on 4 major practices or tentpoles. And those are higher purpose, which could be the vision or mission of the organization. Stakeholder orientation, which says we will do no one thing in benefit of a stakeholder to the detriment of another stakeholder. Now contrast that with corporate capitalism, where we're going to decimate an entire level of management in order to increase shareholder value. Where in stakeholder orientation, the idea is we are going to do win-win solutions. So it's going to benefit all stakeholders. The third component is conscious leadership. And I described that a little bit in terms of servant leadership. Servant leadership is the real flag post of conscious leadership. And again, that is derived from the fact of how do I support you to be successful from a leadership standpoint. And finally, conscious culture. And conscious culture depicts how are we going to work together? How do we want our clients to see us? How do we want our employees to see us? So we describe that and articulate that up front with all of our stakeholders and all those that we relate with. I often say you can tell a lot about an organization in terms of how they fight. And so when conflict arises, how are we going to treat that conflict? Is it going to be no holds barred, the gloves come off, and people get stabbed in the back and all these kind of things? Or are we going to lay our cards on the table and express what our thoughts and feelings are so that we have an opportunity to really dialogue on how does that align with the overall purpose? How does that benefit our stakeholders? How does that impact us achieving our goals? Those are the kinds of things that I think really fit the kind of workforce that people are just longing for today.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned conflict. What are some common challenges that you actually see in the workforce?
That's a great question. So what most often comes to me in terms of speaking with other CEOs and leaders of companies is the epidemic of turnover. Turnover often occurs within the first 6 months of employment. And oftentimes it's because of something I call hire 'em and forget 'em. And that's when we spend so much time up front screening the person to only bring them on board, throw them an SOP or manual and say, read this and I'll check back with you in about a week or two. Meanwhile, the person's probably sitting there with a 3-inch thick binder saying, why did I select this job? I could have read this manual on my own. Is no one going to guide me and help me see the bigger picture of what this company's about and identify my roles and goals? Those are critical to maintaining engagement and investment into the higher purpose of that organization.
So if you're working with an organization and this is a big problem, a client just this morning was talking about this, not feeling heard when he's representing his viewpoint, or lots of changes are happening in companies with mergers and people losing positions and everybody jockeying around their different roles.
Yep.
How can you help them with this?
Well, I have to say that within mergers and acquisitions, where most organizations fall down, and it's interesting to note that 60% of mergers do not work out successfully for the organization. We spend so much time on the technology transfer and the process transfer that we don't spend time on the human transfer, the human element of those changes. And that's something that I bring to the table in terms of a dialogue process, whereby we sit everyone down and open up conversation regarding some challenges. What are we feeling about these changes? And how are those feelings affecting our productivity and our performance and how we relate to others?
And then we've talked also about pain points in organizations. How do you approach that with them?
That's a great question. So all organizations have some level of pain points. And so whether it's turnover, whether it's employee relations issues, whether it's just poor leadership and employees' morale is very low, those are the things that I unearth through a process of conducting what I call an HR audit and an organizational assessment. And so we start identifying, well, we don't have a very clear mission. We don't have a very clear outline of how we support our employees. In fact, we don't have any kind of performance and performance management systems in place. We might not even have any developmental programs in place. And let me just tell you, if you're not developing the performance of your employees, they're likely planning to leave. It's an expectation. It is no longer a luxury to train employees. It is now a critical expectation to continue to grow and develop your employees if you want to retain them and continue their engagement.
Because it also costs more money to replace them
No
than
question.
to train them.
The industry standard is that it costs about 1.5 times a person's salary to replace them in turnover. So if you figure it that standpoint, a $30,000 person, how much money are you turning over? Well, that's a great deal of money. So would you rather invest $2,000 in training or have that person turnover and you expend about $50,000?
Right. And that's the conversation I often have when I'm talking to companies about helping people with their communication skills, be it becoming more of a leader in the way that they present themselves, having that polished presence, or the people who speak English as a second language and have all the skills, but their challenges are that they're not understood clearly. So that certainly becomes a challenge, and we want to be able to help them with that. You mentioned performance review, and I hear that the world is changing now, that not everybody wants that performance review, or they want it more frequently than this annual review.
Yes.
What about
Yes.
that?
You know, I've had the luxury of working on and rehabilitating many performance management systems. And I'm strongly invested in competency-based evaluation systems as well as objective-based evaluation systems. All too often, the evaluation systems that I've encountered throughout my 20 years are highly subjective in nature. So therefore, it's not something that's concrete and measurable to be able to determine how that person is performing. So that's where the objectives come into place. A competency should also be described in terms of what full proficiency looks like, and then what subpar proficiency looks like within each one of those competencies. That's going to articulate for the employee very clearly what those expectations are, but it also provides a level of comfort for the manager who doesn't want to have conflict either, to be able to articulate what their expectations are for that particular employee.
And how often should it be?
That's a great question. So the baby boomer population, their idea of performance management was, I'll see you once a year, tell me I'm doing a great job, and then we can keep moving on. However, the younger generation, the highly transactional and instantaneous generation, is looking for constant and continuous feedback. Therefore, we need to leverage some of our technical systems to enable that to happen, but also we need to keep in our minds that that is the predisposition and perception of the younger workforce, that they're continuously looking for feedback and guidance. And so if we're not providing that, you better bet they're making up in their mind what you think they think. So again, back to your point about clear communication, we know we can't judge a book by its cover. We know that we can't assume what someone else is thinking. Therefore, that feedback is going to be really critical to maintain alignment to our overall purpose and have that performance accomplishment that we're looking for.
And so the proficiency of soft skills isn't just for the employee, it's also for the leadership. They have to have those skills as well.
Very much so.
Ryan, tell me, why do companies or individuals contract with you?
That's a great question. So over the past several years, I've contracted with organizations to provide executive leadership development as well as frontline supervisory development. One of your greatest liabilities as an organization are your employees. I want to make sure that they're your greatest asset, not your greatest liability. And what I mean by that is, if you promote someone into a supervisory role, but don't support that transition to a new level of competency that that person's going to be held to as a leader, then you're doing them a disservice as well as your organization, as well as all the employees that are going to report to that new supervisor. Just one misstep in terms of a question of what you can and can't ask during an interview could subject your company to a huge discrimination lawsuit. And for the small to medium-sized employer, that could put you out of business. So I work with companies to make sure that their greatest asset is not their greatest liability. That comes with leadership development, that comes from HR and process consulting, and it also comes from career development. I support persons in career transition as well. So I've been writing professional resumes for at least 10 years, and I found out I'm really good at it. In fact, the typical response I get from most of my clients is, Ryan, not only did I get a professionally polished resume, but I got a 15% increase because I got the job that I wanted and my confidence back again. That's the kind of stuff I live on.
Absolutely, that's wonderful, knowing that you're helping people throughout the entire process. Is there anything else I forgot to ask you, Ryan? Anything else special to HR evolution or the work that you're doing?
Linda, I'm glad you asked the question. I think it really comes down to people before profit. That's kind of a moniker of mine. And if you're constantly putting profit before people, you're going to disintegrate the morale of the organization, you're going to beat people down and burn them out, and you're not going to have the type of longevity and the kind of relationships that we all want in a work environment. I believe work can be a conduit to social evolution. It's how we treat each other inside the workforces that matriculates out into the community and out into our families as well. And these are the kinds of things where I believe we need to hold ourselves to a high standard of servant leadership, of a conscious workforce, of conscious culture. All those things combined are going to provide the kind of environment that attracts, engages, and retains top talent.
Excellent. So it's not just HR evolution, it's social evolution as well.
Indeed.
Right. Now, how can people get in touch with you?
So you can reach me at my email, rmcshane, MCSHANE, at hrevolutionllc.com. You can also reach me by calling 410-688-5054. And of course, I would love for you to check out my website at www.hrevolutionllc.com.
Ryan, this has been so informative, so much information that certainly explain why I brought you here today to talk about the soft skills that you need to know. It's not just about the hard skills. So thank you very much for today's interview.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to meet with you, Linda.
Okay, great. Nice talking to you.